I'd like to introduce myself. For some of you, you may know me as Candy's husband. Am I right? And if you knew my kids, you might also know me as Jeremy or Jennifer's dad. And of course, they're a little bit older. But now, I am on staff here at Sydney First as a licensed lay pastor, and my name's Terry Sharp. I serve the congregation at Joy Church, and I just got appointed to this church November 1st of this last year, and it's been a 2-year journey to get to this point. So I'm really blessed and I'm really thankful. And also, for any of you that have been involved with Joy Church, if you can raise your hand. There's many people that have been involved. And I just want to say this. It's been about 12 years, and through you serving and being able to help those folks and us and me help them has been a true blessing. Some of the folks have been there for many, many years, flipping pancakes or doing those kind of things. So it's just really wonderful. I just want to say thank you from them and from me. One of the interesting things is I have a wonderful family down at Joy Church. And the cool thing is we call you guys the big church, okay? Or don't we? Yeah. So I have actually 2 wonderful families. I have the families that are down in Joy Church, but more importantly, I have this family that's sitting here today. So thank you. Thank you. We're on a series right now about grave clothes. In the grave clothes, we've been talking about white noise and sin. We've been talking about all of those things that kind of bind us up and put us in that tomb that keeps us from going anywhere, doesn't it? And today, I get to talk about something that's called failure and regret. Failure and regret. Now, hopefully Pastor Shivington's here. I hope he doesn't regret the fact that he's got me up here this morning. You know what I mean? He's probably in the back going, shaking his head. But seriously, and for me, this kind of started. We were on a plane flight. My son and my daughter-in-law are in Japan, and actually this morning my daughter is in Japan as well with them. He's an engineer for Toyota, and we went to visit last April. Well, in April you get on a plane, and anybody that's been on an 18 or 20-hour flight knows there's nothing you can do but just this, right? And you're stuck and you don't know what to do. Well, I'm looking at all these movies and stuff, and I just came up on this one that was about Lego. I got to remember the word. It was a Lego brickumentary. Now, everybody, I love Legos, and I played with them as a kid. And actually, I bought those ones for my kids at Christmas so I could be the one to put them together. It was so good. Well, it was a documentary about their culture and who they are as a company. And one of the things that was really cool was they were talking about failure. And it was thought that failure in their context was a way to help improve and go on and become better with what it is that they had done. So if I failed at something, you learn from the lesson, you move on. But the failure that I'm talking about and the regret that is tied to it is something that's even different. It's a lot more different. It's something that where you're at, that you failed and you can't go any further. You know, in the scripture, we're sitting there and we watch Jesus go into Gethsemane, and he is struggling. And he asks all of his disciples to sit and pray. And then what's he do? He takes Peter, James, and John with him, and they go out. And in the scripture, he talks about how bad he feels, how distressed he was. And for him and for Jesus, he just needed somebody to be with him, right? You know, he told him that his soul was crushed with grief to the point of his death, or to the point of death, and he asked them to stay there and watch with me. And then Jesus, he went a little bit further, and he fell face down to the ground. Now, this picture to me means he was in a great amount of stress, wasn't he? He was really hurting. He prayed that if it was possible, that the awful hour awaiting him might pass. And then he asked, Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible through you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me, and yet I want your will and not mine. So what's he do? Jesus returns, and he finds these disciples asleep. And he goes, Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you stay awake and watch with me even 1 hour? I can't imagine that feeling. That's the kind of failure that I'm talking about. Jesus, in his time of need, in something that he has to have help with and prayers with, they failed him. They failed him. So further on, he goes back to does the same thing. He prays, and he does this 3 times, doesn't he? And eventually the betrayer does come, and he's gone. Well, Jesus was looking for that support from his disciples at that point, wasn't he? He was really looking for help. And the thing is, I think in this help also, even though Jesus was such that, I know he wasn't angry, because he doesn't have that type. I mean, he loves these men. He knows them even better than they do. They know themselves, right? So here he is, and he looks. Okay, I'm nervous. Hold on. I'm losing my train of thought. This is bad. Please, Jesus. He never failed me yet, has he? I knew I wrote that down for a reason. When he comes up and he says to Simon, are you sleeping? It's not necessarily that Jesus was irritated or he was mad at him. It was because he said it in love, and he knew he was compassionate and understanding as to what was going on. He knew themselves, as I said, better than they did. Peter must have been a little bit startled to hear Jesus call him Simon. And Peter, Simon was the old sleeping man that Jesus brought in as one of the first disciples, right? And then Peter was the one who he is now, and with Jesus. So the one thing, Peter was the one, didn't he, that sliced off the ear of the slave when he was taken away, right? He was ready to fight, and he did fight. But the one thing that Peter couldn't do was keep the Sandman from keeping him awake, right? Couldn't keep him awake. So like I said, Jesus went away and he prayed. Then he returned, and then he found them asleep again. And then he came back a 3rd time and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Now 3 times Jesus prayed, and the 3 times Jesus checked to see what his disciples were up to. And again, I don't think Jesus was angry at them. He couldn't have been. But what he was worried about, I think the most, was the fact that they were needing to pray for what was about to happen, what was going to happen, everything that was going on. If you would, could you get into your pew Bible if you like? Look at page 776, and then also Mark chapter 14, verse 50. And I think this one tells it all. Page 776, March 14, 50. You know, the scripture is this: then all his disciples, you're still going, all your disciples, then all of his disciples deserted him and ran away. They deserted him and ran away. So, can you imagine being one of those disciples? Jesus had been asking you to sit there and pray for him, but yet I fell asleep. I fell asleep. Then they come to the point in time where they said they would follow Jesus to wherever. And what do? They left. Okay? I'd say that's failure. Right? I'd say that's failure. Well, with that kind of failure, when you take it into your heart, and you know, we've been talking about grave clothes and those tombs that we share, or we have, those grave clothes, I think, tightened on those guys just a little bit that time. So here they are. They're feeling in their hearts, they're feeling that the grave clothes start tightening up. They start stinking a little more. They just bind them to the point where they are, you know, from that failure, they have this regret that they didn't do what Jesus had asked them to do. All right? So, in my travels in my life, Candy and I have been involved with a prison ministry. It's called Epiphany, and one of the places that we serve is the Ohio Reformatory for Women. It's over in Marysville, and we call it ORW. And we also get involved. We're going to go to another facility. It's Dayton Correctional Institute's DCI. We'll start doing these walks there. One of the things that we do is we make relationships, or we build relationships with the women and the folks that are there. So you guys are smiling. I like it. So we're sitting there, and we get to know people from all walks of life. And one of the things, I got to make sure I look at the time. There we go. One of the things that we find is when we serve with them, a lot of these women really failed. And one of the things that I've heard more than once was, please don't judge me on those 2 minutes that I did what it is that I did. Don't judge me. They and for the most part, the ones that recognize that they failed are the ones that are able to move on. But while we're in there are things on the outside that happen all the time. So they're in their little tomb where they're at inside, but then they have a bigger tomb that's going on. They have their grave clothes that are wrapped around them, and they're being bound by all of these things. So I hear more than once, and I've heard it many, many times, there was a death in my family, and I couldn't be there. That's regret. That's that kind of regret that just sits right in here. But it's the same thing when they find that their daughter or their son did so well on a class, and they got A's, and they couldn't be there to be part of that family. Now, I realize that they did something to be there, and they know that. But they're also in this tomb with all of these things just wrapped around them, those grave clothes that they smell. I know Pastor Shivington last week talked about a World War II veteran that had fallen asleep at his post, and the Japanese came through. I had misunderstood it when I went to, I actually practiced this sermon last week at Joy Church, which was a good thing. But I thought that that particular person, when he had passed, that people were killed during that engagement, and I don't believe that was the case. So I'm sorry for saying that. I didn't realize it. But it's not to say that there aren't other instances where somebody's fallen asleep in those kind of situations. It could be in Korea, it could have been in Vietnam, could have been anywhere, where they were asleep and somebody came in and they killed their buddies or did something like that. They failed. But the thing is, they carry that in their hearts and in that tomb that they have, that they built, right? And it happens. For me, this is and for me, mine has been that I didn't finish what I wanted to finish, and that was school. Now, anybody who's been to Ohio State, around Lane and High, that's where I used to be, I lived down. There's a place called the Library. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's a good bar. It's funny because Candy would sit there and call at 1:30 in the morning. This is when I was just starting to date her. And she goes, "Is Terry there?" And she'd go, or my roommates would go, "No, he's at the library." I had her duped for a while. But my regret was, and my failure was not doing what I needed to do so that I could take care of my family. And later on in my life, be able to do that. It's a great amount of regret that I didn't do that. And I still struggle with that. I really do. But you know what Jesus did? And it's so cool that those men that fell asleep in Gethsemane, God saw them after he became resurrected, didn't he? And with that resurrection, he basically looked at them and said, "We're going to move on. We're good. And through God's grace, you're forgiven for whatever it is that is causing your bands, your grave clothes to bind you even more." So for them, God walked with them. He took them, and because of the apostles, they've created the church that we now are part of, the universal church. And through them, they've been spreading the news since 2,000 years ago, right? And we continue to do that as well. That's what we're here for. So they were forgiven. They were able to become white as snow by what God had given them through his grace. And only through his grace can that happen. Now, if I was at Joy Church right now, I'd be saying amen, and they'd be going, yeah. I tell you, those folks are wonderful. If you ever get a chance, come down and see us, because you're liable to hear everything. That veteran, well, no, the women at ORW, when we do those programs, we spend a weekend with them, and it's very similar to Emmaus, and we spend this time with them, and what happens to them, even though they have these things, the failures that they have deep in their hearts, in black, wherever that black space is in their tomb, those things start to come out. They start to unravel. God looks at them, and they get his grace. His grace comes, and that's how they are able to start cutting away at those things that are binding them, even though they're still in that same situation, no matter what they're at now. So next week, somebody else is going to die, or some other really wonderful thing is going to happen in that family. They're still going to be there, but they realize that Jesus is cutting those things away. The same as with the veterans. Um, the gentleman that told Pastor Shivington what he had done, he confessed, and God forgave him. He had carried that sorrow that had turned into the regret that was stuck in his heart, and through Jesus was able to become set free. All of his bindings and all of those grave clothes and all of those stinky things that had been in him had left. It was really good. Now for me, that's another story. Yeah, Dave back here laughing at me. But for me, it's I still struggle with it. I still struggle. I don't think I'm sufficient enough. I don't think I know enough. I don't think I'll ever be like someone over here or someone over there. When I grew up, I have two very successful brothers, and I say this not that I'm jealous or I envy them, and I'm just thankful that God's blessed them. Okay, but I'm not like them. Never will be. And so, for me, that regret is still kind of stuck in there. It's that dark spot. But it happened, I think it was Thanksgiving this last year. We were gathered. You know how families gather at dinner? And you sit there and you start talking and you start hearing these family stories about what all's going on, right? And we're sitting around after we're eating, and all of us are like trying to fall asleep. And I'm talking, and my brother brings up this thing about, remember the library? And I said, yeah, I remember the library. And he goes, do you think things would be different if you hadn't gone there? And I had to stop. And this was an epiphany for me. I had to stop. And when I did, I told him, no, I wouldn't change a thing. And I said, God wouldn't have put me in this plot where I'm at this day, right now, sitting up here as nervous as I'll get out. I wouldn't change it. God answered my prayers. And I told him that. My brothers are like, they looked at me like, what? But I think they get it. They get it. They both do. So that's where I was at. So I guess my question then for you is, I know all of us have failed. We have that failure. And I know all of us have that spot somewhere deep here that's dark, right? I don't care who you are. I know everybody's got something. What are you going to do? And for me, what I keep doing is I keep picking away at that, and I know Jesus will sit there and he starts cutting away these grave clothes, and he starts putting them to the side, with the sin and all of the other things that I do. I'm so thankful that Jesus is able to do that. So I guess, no, I don't guess, I'm going to ask, what are you going to do? You going to let Jesus have it? I hope so. I hope so. It's been fun. I'm thankful that God's got me at this place. The funny thing is, the real funny thing is, when I was sitting here and I was going back and forth with Pastor Shivington, I think he really twisted my arm. I'd stalled long enough to have to get up here. I really did, and I knew I was against the wall. And he sent me this list of these things, and one of them was the regret. And I don't know why I gravitated to it, but now I do. God put me here for that, for a reason, so I'm so thankful.